feminist prime minister throws his finance minister under the bus with all the other ministers. Canadians now spend more in taxes than they do on housing, on food, and on clothes combined. No wonder they're putting the training wheels back on for her. She can tell that to the prime minister.
The Liberals did not have a good night last night because they lost the LaSalle-Lamar Verdun by-election. We're about to head into question period to check it out.
Let's take a look.
Canadians in the former Liberal strongholds of Toronto and Montreal have now given their verdict. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Taxes up, costs up, crime's up, time's up. Mr. Speaker, isn't it time for Canadians to have a chance to render their verdict right across the country, electing a common-sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
So, we are into question period, and as probably all of you know who have been following the election results last night and everything that was blown up this morning, the Liberals lost another fortress riding.
Oh, they sure did. It was so bad that the candidate, Ms. Palestini, gave what sounded like a concession speech around, I want to say 9:45 p.m., and then just left. So she left all her volunteers, she left everybody else that was in her campaign. She just booked it out of there. The reporters thought that maybe she went out to get some fresh air and was coming back, but she climbed into a car and left.
Yeah, and honestly, although it shouldn't be surprising, it still disgusts me because, as I was saying to some of the other viewers in Discord, if it was me running for election, you better believe that I would be staying to the end, and that's even if I lose. And why is that? Because every single person in that room is there for you.
Well, and the fact was that only a fraction of the ballots had been counted by that point, and they have, or they usually have, I should say, a representative at each and every single polling station watching the ballots be counted. So, you know, Ms. Palestini went home, or wherever she went, she took off, we know that much, and just left all of her volunteers and her representatives there until the wee hours of the night to count, like to watch the ballot counting for her.
Well, and there's the people that are kind of running the victory party, the people that are taking care of the different people that are attending the victory party. Like it is so selfish and
disgraceful is the word I would use,
and disrespectful to everybody. But you know, this is what we've come to see from the Liberal government. It is just unreal.
Well, and let's not forget that this particular candidate was handpicked by Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, handpicked. And as we can see, Trudeau sure picks the winners, doesn't he? But this is a catastrophic collapse of the Liberal Party here, because remember, this is the same riding that all of the volunteers quit just weeks before the election.
Right, and I think this shows that there is no safe riding in this country for the Liberal Party.
Right, and all of the incumbent MPs now are going to be very nervous, very ticked off, and you will notice that Mr. Trudeau was not at question period. And
no, he was not.
Who did he decide to leave? Again, no sympathy for her, but he left Chrystia Freeland to take all the flack.
I ask members, especially members on the far side of the House, to please not to take the microphone until they're recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to have the chance to talk about the economy. That is because today we had good news for Canadians. Inflation is back down to where it was before COVID hit. Inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range this whole year. Wages have outpaced inflation for 19 months in a row. But the Conservatives don't want to talk about it. They are so weak and spiteful that for them, good news for Canadians is bad news that they want to ignore.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So inflation isn't just dropping, it's been dropping like a stone.
Well, and if you dissect the numbers, it's the essentials that are still having a high rate of inflation or higher than what they want, which is between 2 and 3%. And it's non-essential things like furniture and clothing that are going down.
Mr. Speaker, this incompetent finance minister would tell you that you should celebrate that after prices rising faster than at any time in 40 years, they continue to rise, just not as quickly. I'm sure the people living in tent encampments or the record-smashing 2 million people lined up at food banks or the 1 in 4 kids going to school hungry after 9 years of this government will be celebrating. But what we now find out is that it's worse than we thought. According to a document just released, the government's second carbon tax will cost $9 billion in lost GDP. Why won't we have a carbon tax election to decide?
Yeah, so this is the issue with the Liberals, is they're trying to gaslight Canadians and saying, look everybody, inflation's back down to 2%, jobs done. Well, the problem is, as Pierre said, you've had prices increasing dramatically over the last couple of years, far faster than anyone can afford. And now that the increase is back down to the normal levels, they seem to think that everyone can afford everything as it was before all of this mess started in the first place. Well, that's not how it works. And also, when you see inflation dropping like a stone, if we hear of inflation dropping now below 2%, everyone needs to really perk their ears up and get very concerned, because that means a recession is coming.
Well, and additionally to that, as Ryan had mentioned, inflation is, within the acceptable range of 2 to 3%, but that does not mean that prices are going down. Prices are still at those record highs. They're just not going up as fast as they have been in the past. They're still going up. They're still going up 2 to 3% year over year. They're just not going up as rapidly as they had been before.
And one of the main reasons interest rates are dropping so fast now is to try to prevent a recession, as per the Bank of Canada.
Mr. Speaker, I think we all know why the Conservatives are so panicked about an election. It's because they can see that the economic news is good.
Man, the heckling was so good today.
Well, and it was really, really interesting because, especially at this point, you heard all of the Conservatives laughing about them saying panicked. And then you can actually hear one of the Conservatives say here, you should look at everyone in your back bench, because everyone in the back bench of the Liberals is frickin' terrified of what's going to happen in the next election because of what is happening to the Liberal fortress ridings. Never mind the non-fortress ridings that are on the different in the different provinces of Canada where the Liberals don't have a strong hold over.
That's right. I mean, they're terrified that they're going to be losing their jobs. I had heard a rumor that if they lost the riding in Montreal, which they did, that a whole bunch more Liberals are going to be retiring.
30 to 40.
Yeah, as in they're not going to be running in the next election, because my guess is they know they won't be able to win their seats, so why bother?
Well, and a new Abacus poll came out today talking about the fact that based on the new numbers, the Liberals are now in 4th place in seats if an election were to be held today.
That is insane. So the Liberals are getting fewer seats,
than the
hypothetically,
NDP.
Than the NDP and the Bloc.
The NDP were projected to get 38. The Liberals were projected to get 32. And the Bloc would be the official opposition.
That's crazy. That's happened before.
Right. So that's over 120 seats lost by the Liberal government.
You know what? They deserve it, though.
Oh, they
Why would
absolutely.
Canadians vote for them after what they've done to this country? They deserve
absolutely
everything
deserve.
that they get.
So who's panicked, Freeland?
The Honourable Member for Byelection. C-319 is a bloc bill that would eliminate the discrimination in the OAS for seniors aged 65 to 74 and those 75 and over. And instead of allowing for $5,000 to $6,000 in wages without losing the GIS. At committee, all parties voted in favor of our bill. Now, will the government ensure that this bill gets implemented because it requires a royal recommendation? Will the Liberals give that recommendation and support seniors, yes or no? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we acknowledge clearly that the oldest seniors, those at 75 and over, have higher costs and are more vulnerable. That is why we added support for them. And I share with the Bloc a concern for our seniors, and that's why I would ask the Bloc to support us when it comes to dental care. That's an important program for all Quebecers, and especially for vulnerable seniors.
Okay, so they're asking for changes to the old age security, and you say, well, we don't care about that, but if you want to support seniors, then you should support our dental program.
Right, and I think this goes to what we were hypothesizing earlier, is that all the demands that the Bloc has are money-based, right? And I don't know if the Liberals want to spend any more money on any new programs that aren't theirs.
Because if they do, that will have to be included in the fall economic statement, which would then make that a confidence vote.
Right, but the Bloc are saying we want royal recommendation for our bill, C-319, which is to increase the old age security benefit to seniors. I believe it's aged 65 to 75. And if you guys give us that, then we'll vote in favor of your confidence, as in we won't vote with the Conservatives and or the NDP. So we will essentially vote to keep you in power if you guys give us what we want.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
It's day 2 in the House as the first female finance minister, again, is being publicly humiliated by the fake feminist prime minister. What's worse is that she's being replaced by an unelected man outside of her own caucus who her boss is now shielding from conflict of interest laws that allow him to take her job and keep his money. A man who works against our resource sector, who exports jobs to China while championing higher carbon taxes on heating and eating for Canadians. Why won't the finance minister talk to her boss about ending the personal attacks on her own credibility?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
This is a very interesting tactic that the Conservatives are repeating in today's question period. And it's also very interesting the fact that they're using women to make these attacks. And the attacks, ironically, aren't really on solely Chrystia Freeland. What they're trying to do is twist the knife a little bit into the pride that anyone would have injured in this situation where your boss is basically like, yeah, you know, you're just going to be a token finance minister, but Bill here is coming in, he's going to be, you know, doing all the actual work and getting paid for it. So I find it very interesting that they're almost trying to turn Freeland against Trudeau, which won't happen. But they're taking the feminist aspect in going after all of the female Liberal voters. So it's very interesting, the multi-pronged attack that they're actually using here to try to get under the Liberal skin, divide and conquer, as well as steal voters.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to have the chance to talk about feminism, because I know what a feminist government looks like. A feminist government builds the first national system of early learning and childcare. A feminist government makes contraceptives free, and a feminist government ensures that every single woman in Canada has full control over her body. Until the Conservatives stand up for that, they have no right to talk.
Okay, so I believe it was at this point I looked over at Tanya, because you're not allowed to yell anything out in question period.
You're not supposed to.
And I risked getting
kicked out,
and then I shut my mouth. Because I just couldn't believe what we were hearing.
I think we both just looked at each other and we're like thinking, you know, because again, you're not really supposed to talk, but we're just like thinking, did they just drag abortion into this?
Yes, they did.
I mean, you know, if the Liberals cared so much about abortion, they would use this last calendar year in order to create legislation that protects abortion rights in this country. But they don't want to do that. They would rather have it, you know, up in the air so that they could accuse the Conservatives of wanting to take it away, even though the Conservatives have zero intention of doing that. But without having this legislation in place, they can accuse the Conservatives of wanting to do that.
And they not only want that boogeyman tactic now, they want it the next time, and the next time, and the next time after that.
Yeah, you watch. When the Conservatives actually take government, that's going to be one of the things that they bring up constantly.
Yep. And the Conservatives have far more to fix in this country than go after abortion rights.
No, they have no intention of going after abortion at all.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Fake feminist prime minister throws his finance minister under the bus with all the other ministers. The real record of this finance minister is record smashing 1 million people visiting a food bank in her province. In Ontario, 1 in 4 Canadians living in poverty. Canadians now spend more in taxes than they do on housing, on food, and on clothes combined. No wonder they're putting the training wheels back on for her. She can tell that to the Prime Minister.
I think you and I were like trying not to laugh like out loud during that. That was just a beautiful zinger by Melissa, and it was great to hear like in the house while it happened.
Well, and as you'll see, you know, Chrystia Freeland tries to, or maybe it isn't even her, but they try and use the classic leftist tactics of, oh, I'm so injured, and how dare you say mean things to me? They're facts, because you have no idea what you're doing, and if you want proof, look out the window and see the people living in the streets.
Mr. Speaker, I've stood up to Trump, and I have stood up to Putin. Juvenile, playground insults from the wannabe MAGA maple syrup conservatives do not frighten me at all. But what I think is really interesting is that they don't actually want to talk about the economy. And that's because good economic news for Canadians is bad news for them.
But I thought when they were talking about the economy in their question, you said, I'm glad I can talk about the economy.
Well, I just want to say that I think that was a really dumb move by Freeland to say, I stood up to Trump.
Yep.
That's not something you say about an ally, because he could be the next president.
Yep.
They could be having to work with him for the next 4 years. Now, the Liberals aren't going to be getting elected, so they're probably not going to be working with Trump if he gets elected for the next 4 years. But, I mean, hypothetically, if they're aiming to win, the Liberals could be working with Trump for the next 4 years. So why would you say something like that about the person who's going to be leading the country, which is our closest ally?
Well,
that's so stupid.
And here's the other stupid thing. She says, I've stood up to Putin. Oh, shut up. Like, here's the problem. You stood up to Putin. If Putin wanted to, he could invade Canada because of the state you've left our military in. And who would you run to if he was president? Donald Trump. So don't even start.
The honourable member from Haldimand Norfolk.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. This self-proclaimed feminist prime minister has repeatedly shoved aside strong women who have stood up to him. Now the prime minister is replacing the first ever female finance minister with an unelected Mark Carbon Tax Carney. Why is this finance minister allowing herself to be publicly humiliated in this manner?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is a bit rich to hear the member of the Conservative Party pretend to care about feminism when their own leader was using misogynistic hashtags on their videos to attract men who hate women. Mr. Speaker, it was anything but feminist when they bring forward backdoor legislation to ban abortion and to take away women's right to choose their own rights, Mr. Speaker, or when they all voted against increased funding to combat gender-based violence or to support survivors. Mr. Speaker, their
Excuse me.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the look you gave me when this was going on in question period.
Yeah, I forgot about this person talking. First off, did you see her hands?
I don't think we see her speak very often. I think that's why we don't know her name.
But nobody on the Liberal side ever, does anything but read what is given to them. So, yeah, let's talk about how the Liberals care about violence against women. Remember this?
Trudeau doesn't care, Ford doesn't care, Arif doesn't care, and the government doesn't care.
I want to reassure you very much that all of us on this committee care very deeply. Women in this country are being killed, and the other parties don't care. I'm disgusted. We need to be talking about this issue so that we can stop.
Don't you remember that debacle at the Status of Women's Committee when Anita Vandenbelt and the NDP and the rest of the Liberals and the NDP decided to talk about abortion instead of actually listening to the two witnesses were there? One of them that was there on her 3-year anniversary of almost dying because of domestic abuse. Don't you remember that, Liberals?
I remember that. I remember speaking to Kate Alexander and Megan Walker afterwards, and it wasn't the Conservatives that they were upset with.
Right, and they had to come on our show because they didn't get to say what they should have said to you because you shut them down. So, no.
And we saw Vandenveld today, didn't we?
Oh yeah, I saw her in the lobby, and I had to walk away very quickly.
Yeah, there's things that you want to say but can't say because you don't want to cause a scene and get kicked out. But you know what? She's probably read my email.
The honourable member for Byelection. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to bring something to the government's attention, something that won't happen. The Bloc will not agree to tolerating encroachment on Quebec's jurisdiction in exchange for this or that. That won't happen. The Liberal government has to be consistent. They should implement a bill that they voted for. It's got to be one of two ways. Either they get the NDP to support them or they'll pay the price.
That sounds like a threat.
It does sound like a threat.
Let's keep watching.
Honourable Minister of Labour. Mr. Speaker, speaking of clarity, will the leader of the Bloc Québécois clarify what exactly he said or would say to hundreds of thousands of Quebecers who today benefit from free dental care that he voted against? The honourable member for Byelection. It's not really clear what was voted against or in favor of. I've never voted in favor of an intrusion on Quebec's jurisdiction. The Liberals have a bloc bill now in their hands. All it takes is a royal recommendation. They say that we're not going to get it, and so the bloc's bill will never go through, and seniors will never get their money. That petty little game is what they want to play. If they are not willing to do this, then we're heading for an election.
Crystal clear. If you don't give us royal recommendation for Bill C-319, then we will vote non-confidence.
And the Liberals keep saying they're not going to get it.
So what will the NDP do?
And this is going to be the question. The Bloc may end up putting the NDP right back in the vice that they thought they were escaping. So unless there's any backroom deals that are going to go on between the Bloc and the Liberals, and the only reason for the Bloc to actually say this in question period is because the background conversations haven't worked. So now they're letting everybody know that if there is an election, why it is, and what precisely will happen if the Bloc doesn't get their way. So it's going to be very interesting to see the NDP keep voting with the Liberals until their pharmacare bill gets passed through the Senate. So this is going to be a real interesting couple of weeks coming up, because The NDP are going to be tested, the Bloc's going to be tested, and I can tell you, nobody knows what's going to happen. Not even the party leaders themselves. So stay tuned, because we could be going to an election or we could be waiting till the spring. Nobody knows.